Hi guys, this is Miss Scott here. Before we get too far, please make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can stay tuned for all of the exciting math videos we will watch throughout the year. So before we actually get into Chapter 1, we are going to learn some prerequisite skills. So the question that we're going to answer in today's lesson is, how do we evaluate expressions and solve equations? So first we're going to evaluate some expressions involving absolute value. So let's talk about what absolute value is. It is a number's distance from zero. And if you remember, a distance is always positive. So if you were going to put, for example, the number -4 on a number line and then take the absolute value of it, remember those symbols, -4 is 4 units away from 0. Likewise, +4's absolute value or distance from 0 is also +4. So a key thing to remember about absolute value is that it is always positive. So if something is inside of those absolute value symbols, that part is going to be positive. All right, so let's look at some examples here. You can think of absolute values as parentheses, so if there's something inside of those, you have to do that first. So in number 1, 7 minus 11 is our first step. Well, that's -4. And then we still need to take the absolute value of that. So the absolute value of -4 is 4. Okay, let's do example 2. Inside of those absolute value brackets, we have 5 plus 12, which is 17. And the absolute value of 17 is 17. All right, now 3 gets a little bit trickier because we have this -2 hanging out front. Well, that just means at the end we're going to multiply what's inside those absolute value symbols by -2. So first, let's take care of this piece. 51 minus 100 is -49. So we have the absolute value of that. And then in front, we have this -2 times that. Next step is to take the absolute value of -49. So we have -2, and then the absolute value of -49 is just 49. So our last step to get our answer, -2 times 49 is -98. And you might be looking at that and thinking, well, Miss Scott, you said absolute value always is positive. Well, this part was what was in the absolute value, and that was positive. But that -2 out front is what made our final answer actually negative. All right, next problem here, last one of the absolute value problems. We have -18 minus 7, and if you prefer, you can think of this as plus a -7, which is -25. And the absolute value of -25 is 25. All right, so let's move on to some more expressions. But now we're going to evaluate expressions by doing something called substitution. Substitution is simply replacing a variable with an equivalent value. And that equivalent value could be a number or it could be another variable. So it really depends on the problem. In our examples, we are going to be replacing a variable with an equivalent number. So an example is 5 through 8. We're asked to evaluate the expression when x is -2 and y equals 5. So number 5 here, we have 5x. So we're going to plug in -2 for x. So 5 times -2 is -10. And that's it. Now, number 6, we're going to be using both x and y. First step is to substitute x with -2. So we have 30 plus -2 times 5. well, I don't like this negative business. I know that a negative is a positive. So this is just 30 plus 2 times 5, or 30 plus 10, which is 40. Okay, number 7 gets a little bit trickier. Now we've got 10x squared plus times y squared. First, let's plug in for x and y. So 10 times negative 2 squared times 5 squared. All right, if you remember from previous math, we have to use PEMDAS. So first thing we've got to take care of are these exponents. So negative 2 squared is negative 2 times negative 2, which is 4. 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. And I'm going to multiply these two together first. 4 times 25 is 100. So this ends up being 10 times 100, which is 1,000. Okay, last example, example 8. Again, our first step is to substitute. So let's replace that x with negative 2 and y with 5. Okay, again, our order of operations tells us to do that multiplication before the addition and subtraction. So 4 times negative 2, I'm going to think of this as negative 4 times negative 2. So I'm going to change that to plus 8. And at the end, 3 times 5 plus 15. Add those all together, and you will get 73 for our final answer. All right, last little section is solving linear equations. So if you remember, an equation has an equal sign. Notice the first 8 examples, the problem you were given did not contain any equal sign, and that's why we call those expressions. These last 3 examples all have equal signs, and that's why we call them equations. So when you are asked to solve a linear equation, that means you're finding the value of a variable by undoing operations. So you're trying to get the variable all by itself. All right, let's practice that with 3 examples. The first one, I have 510 equals negative 3w, or negative 3 times w. Well, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So if we divide both sides by negative 3, these negative 3's will cancel out and we'll get w all by itself. And 510 divided by negative 3 is negative 170. Once you have the variable all by itself, that's your answer. Okay, number 10 is a little bit more challenging. Whenever you have the same variable on the same side of the equation, your first step is to combine like terms. So I have this 7v plus 4v is 11v. I still have this minus 32 equals 45. Now we have to get rid of that minus 32. Well, what's the opposite of subtracting 32? It's adding 32. So we will add 32 to both sides to get these to cancel. We end up with 11v equals 77. Now we can divide by 11. Those cancel, and we end up with v equals 7. All right, and last but not least, we have an equation with variables on both sides. I don't like to work with negatives, so if I can avoid it, I like to get the h's on one side so that the number in front of them, or the coefficient, is positive. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add this 1h to both sides, so I get that to cancel. And now I'm left with 9 equals 6h plus 1h is 7h plus 107. Now that I have all of the h's, or the variables, on one side, I can solve this just like I did number 10. First, let's subtract 107 from both sides. these cancel. 9 minus 107 is negative 98 equals 7h. Our last step, we can divide by 7, and negative 98 divided by 7 is negative 14 equals h. Well, thank you for watching today's video. If you have any questions, come find me, and please don't forget to subscribe.